I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, July 7th, for our Boundaries webinar and our NOSA webinar series for this year. And this topic I find is very important, and it's one that has impacted my life very significantly over the years. And I just want to share really candidly today from my own journey, some of the obstacles I faced and some of the things, the negative consequences that came in my life as a result of not having any boundaries. And so I look forward to sharing these things with you and the tools that I've learned over the years and the things that I've implemented in my life to really be able to do well in this area, to really show people what I will tolerate in my life and how I want them to treat me, and just the different areas where maybe you too need to set up some boundaries. And we're going to go over some, common signs, almost like warning signs or things that might be happening in your life that might be an indication that you too might need to set up boundaries and really get a clear sense of how you want to move forward in your life. Before we jump in though, I just want to go over what NOSA Foundation is all about. And our mission is to bring hope to those we help, one life at a time. And we do that through mentorship. We offer that one-on-one mentorship and also in group mentoring. And we're looking forward to later this fall to be also implementing some online courses that you can do at your own pace, in your own time, as well as maybe join some specific support groups to journey with you as you process some of those challenges in your life. A mentor is someone who allows you to know that no matter how dark the night, in the morning joy will come. A mentor is someone who allows you to see the higher part of yourself when sometimes it becomes hidden to your own view. This I find so important, to recognize the fact that mentors, they can see past your mess. They can see past where you are. They can see the obstacles you're facing because they've been there before. And they can also help you navigate through the challenges that you're facing now. And so to really consider people in your life as a mentor, to allow them the opportunity to really speak into your life and give them have the openness of heart and spirit to really take their counsel, will be the greatest part of your growth and advancement and healing. I'm excited to announce that we made our online store live. So all the crafts, all the home decor, everything that we put in there, 100% of all proceeds are going to go towards supporting what we do here at NOSA Foundation. So feel free to check it out. You can go to nosafoundation.com and there should be a link on there that will go directly to the online store. You can see what's available and, check in occasionally because I'll be adding new stuff as projects get completed. And it's a great way for you to support what we're doing, as well as maybe even think of ways you can bless others through gifts, or even maybe things that you would like for your own home or for those in your life. So for today's webinar, we're going to be talking about what are boundaries? What do they look like? And there's different types of boundaries. And we're going to be discussing signs that will show you when you maybe need to set up new boundaries and the consequences of when you don't have them in your life. And then I identify 4 main steps that I take in how to set up boundaries. And then we have a quiz we'll be doing as our activation, and then we'll just open up for discussion and end in prayer. So what are boundaries? I think most of us have a pretty balanced sense of what boundaries are. But I found 2 really good definitions, and they're not by the dictionary, but they really do explain it quite well. So boundaries are limits that you put in place in various areas of your life so that you can protect your mental health and your well-being. Another definition was boundaries are the invisible, unchanging protective fences around your life. And I often think about this, like when you think of practically what is a boundary, you know, in a sports field, there's fences that create the boundary. You know, with your children, you set up boundaries where you'll allow them to go, where you won't let them go. And it's for their protection, it's for their safety. And oftentimes in our life, especially as we grow and depending on what we've been taught in our life, we neglect doing that in our life. And it causes us a lot of negative impact in our lives. It causes us a lot of pain, heartache. And as we continue through what I'm going to share tonight, you're going to see the devastating effects that come of it. And in a lot of ways, you might identify with the things that I'm going to share. They might be something that you're currently struggling with, or things that maybe you have struggled with in the past and you're working through. But be open and mindful that without boundaries, we will be walked over, we will be taken advantage of, and it will create a ripple effect in our life of negative behaviors and negative results of allowing others to treat us in negative ways. I love this saying from Brené Brown: when we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. This is something that is very personal to me. As a young child, my world really came crashing down on me at the age of 5. Everything that I had perceived to be a good life. And I just remember myself back then, I was just this joyful young girl. I saw the hope and the possibility in life. Like there was nothing that could bring me down. And that with one specific event in my life, it changed everything. And at that point, I had come to the point where I believed that everyone's happiness was dependent on me. And so as a little girl of about 5 or 6 years old, I started a pattern in my life that caused so much destruction in my life. And I didn't realize this until just, I started to realize it about 10 years ago. And then just even over the last 2 to 3 years, God's really revealed the depths of what it's done in my life and started to walk me through incredible wholeness and healing and really transformation. And without God revealing to me those things, I'm sure I would still be stuck where I was in a lot of destructive patterns. So there's many types of boundaries. Some of these are pretty common. You'll know about them. Physical boundaries. So like that was what I was describing, and the boundaries of a schoolyard, or the boundaries that you have in place for even your property line. When people put up signs, no trespassing. Well, that is a physical boundary that people are putting up to say, this is my space, you can't come past it. You can also have boundaries in relationships. Those are the ones, it could be in your marriage relationship, relationships with friends, relationship with children, anyone else in your life that you are in relationship with, you can have boundaries there as well. You'll need to create boundaries in your time. And this is a huge one that I'm sure a lot of us can identify with. We don't always recognize that we need boundaries with our time. And so often those are neglected, and then we feel the negative consequences of those. We can also have boundaries in our emotional, mental health, in material possessions. So that would be more like, if you had, for example, I have an iPad, right? And so one of my boundaries is I don't let my children use it. And so when you have physical material belongings, you can create boundaries surrounding those as to who has access to it, who doesn't, when they do. And those are important things to put in place. You can also have boundaries at your workplace. And there's other examples that you need to develop boundaries in, but these are the most common. These are the ones that I have impacted my life the most. And so I just wanted to bring those up. And, you know, as we go through today, as you think about this in the upcoming weeks, as you go through the notes and the more in-depth thinking questions that will be emailed to you at the end, you'll have the opportunity to really look at your life and look at the areas where maybe you need a little bit more work on boundaries. And maybe you've got it down pat in regards to how you let people spend your time, but maybe when it comes to relationships, that's where you struggle the most. And so recognizing the fact that boundaries need to be set up in multiple various different areas of your life will help you pinpoint where you're struggling and also help you discover how to set them up and how to focus on that particular area of your struggle. This is an important thing that I learned first off when God started to reveal to me why I was struggling so much. And I realized that I was teaching others how they should teach me or how they should treat me by what I was willing to accept and tolerate. And at first, when God spoke this to me, like I had a hard time accepting it. And I often thought, no, that's not right. How am I teaching others how to treat me? But the more I thought about it and the more I meditated on what God was saying to me, I recognized that that was true. Because if I don't stand up for myself and if I don't speak and I don't communicate what I need, what I want, and what I will tolerate in a specific situation, then they'll treat me a certain way and they'll believe that it's the normal way to do it. And that's exactly what happened in my life. And as a child, it happened. And then when I got married, it happened in my marriage. And then as well, when I started having children, it showed up in my relationship with my children and how they also impacted and related to me. And so I was literally lacking boundaries in every single area of my life. So these are 5 signs that you may need to set up boundaries in your life. The first one, you will take responsibility for other people's thoughts, feelings, or actions. You may feel persistent anger towards someone or something. You feel resentment towards people that you otherwise normally care about. You allow poor behavior at the expense of your own well-being. And in order to get what you need, you may become passive aggressive. And the reason I highlighted these 5 things is because these are probably the 5 ones that I struggled with the most. And one other one I would probably say is I was unable to say no. But there's many other signs that you may need to set up boundaries. And I just want to go over them quickly here. And I just want you to listen to these and think of how many of these apply to you. Number 1, you find it hard to voice your opinions when others disagree with you. People regularly talk about you behind your back. You struggle to say no. If someone's in a bad mood, it affects you. You find it difficult to end phone calls. You feel guilty when you ask for help. You may have been described as passive aggressive. You worry that if you don't agree with someone, their feelings may get hurt. You'd rather everyone else be happy, even if you're not happy. If someone hurts your feelings, you try just to forget about it. You replay conversations in your head even after they've happened and you've moved on. When people fight around you, you feel like you need to fix it. It's difficult for you to express anger and you'd rather just stay silent. You work longer hours than the rest of your family or coworkers. You tend to be the peacemaker in your family. You give more in relationships than you get in return. You overshare when you feel comfortable in new relationships. You value other people's opinions more than you value your own. You'll feel resentment and you don't know how to express it. You may feel uncomfortable when conversations are about you. You may feel guilty to express your own opinion. If another person has an incorrect opinion of you, you want to change it. When you tell people things in confidence, it's rarely kept private. You cannot trust people in your life to be there for you. Or you think that other people in your life need you to be strong and reliable. Now, I know these aren't the only signs, but if any of those stood out to you, if any of those sounded like where you're at or the thoughts that you have or the difficulties you have in relating to other people, then I encourage you to really open yourself up to exploring this deeper and to look for a greater revelation as to where you need to set up these boundaries and how to do that. This is much of the same thing. There's a few new ones in here. You feel guilty when you ask for what you need, or others manipulate you to do things you don't want to. Oh, this is another key one. You do everything for those in your life. That's actually a big one that I'm going to address today. And people have described you as a pushover. So yeah, if any of these apply to you, then, you know, really take this to heart today, because I really believe that you need to work on this area of your life. So the consequences of having boundaries. Now, this list is not exhaustive. There's many other consequences, but these are the consequences that I experienced as a result of me not having any boundaries. I have struggled with anger and resentment for a long time. And when I was younger, I was way better at hiding it, way better of just internalizing it and keeping it inside myself. But as I got older and had more stresses put on me, and had more people, in my opinion, like taking advantage of me and really abusing, you know, my kindness and my desire to, you know, like keep the peace and all of those kind of things, it just, instead of, you know, me feeling appreciated or any of those things, it just stirred up a lot of anger and resentment in me. And it got to the point that I was angry a lot of the time. And my deepest resentment in my life was towards my husband. And it got to a point where I actually didn't like who I was becoming, because I was becoming so angry and so resentful towards him that I couldn't even see him in the light of who he was. All I could see was my anger. And I really didn't like who I was beginning. And that was one of the first steps in me really journeying with God and examining what was going on in my life and what had to change, because I didn't like who I was becoming. And I had always been that way, but it was getting to the point where I couldn't hide it anymore. I couldn't pretend it wasn't there. It was really consuming every area of my life. Another consequence is a loss of self-esteem. You know, when you are often mistreated in relationships, taken for granted, you feel like no one cares, and you feel like everything depends on you. It really affects your self-esteem. And especially in those places when you've put everything on the line and no one seems to care, and it impacts nobody in a way that they even recognize what you're doing. It really causes you to doubt who you are, your value as a person. And that's what it did for me. Creates depression and anxiety. And for many years, as a younger child, I really struggled with depression. And as I got older, it changed to more of it like an anxiety. And the way that manifested was the fact that, you know, I would always be anxious about everything because I always knew that everything depended on me, and that if I didn't follow through and if I wasn't the one to do everything, then everything would literally fall apart. And this was the reality that I created. And even with my kids, like as a young mom, like I literally did everything for my kids. I didn't teach them, you know, basic skills of how to do things. And, you know, they depended on me 100% and all of these things. And it just always created so much anxiety in me and this drive that I had to be this person for them. It creates fear. There's a lot of fear associated with having no boundaries. Some of the fear is associated with, you know, fear about if you actually said what you needed, or if you actually said what you believed or what you thought or what you wanted in that moment, you have fear about how those people will respond to you. You have fear also about the consequences of if you just stop doing what you were doing. You know, would these people no longer be in your life? Would they, you know, retaliate? Would there be consequences? There's also a lot of guilt, and guilt comes, we can have self-induced guilt, but also people can make us feel guilty. And that usually comes through control and manipulation, and also creates stress. And the worst for me was my burnout. And so after 30 years of living this way, I completely burnt out. And at the age of 30, I couldn't do it anymore. It was at that season of my life, by the time it was like 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning, I literally couldn't care for my kids, let alone myself. And so for a period of time, I believe it was like 8 months, my sister and her husband came to live with me to help me recover physically, but also to regain a sense of normalcy in my life and healing so that I could actually become the mom that I needed to be. And in order to do that, I worked for a long time with my counselor. And there was a lot of things that he taught me in that season that I wasn't doing. And I can't address all of the things in this webinar, but a few of the most major ones that he addressed was the fact that I could not say no to people. And I am pretty sure that if you're struggling with boundaries, that's also something that you struggle with. That if someone came to you with a need or a desire, that you find it very difficult to say no. And that's something that I had a difficulty with him. But my counselor helped me realize that I can say no without having a reason why. And actually learning that and implementing that and doing it in my life was pretty hard to do. But the moment I started doing it, I realized that I could do this. And the moment you say no to someone, but you give them an excuse why, like a reason why, then they will always come back and try to tell you, oh, okay, well, I've got the solution for that reason, or I have another solution for that reason. And they'll always try to talk you out of your reason why you don't want to do it. So that's why it's important that when you say no, that you don't have to give your reason why. Galatians 6, 4-5 and 7-8. Each one should test his own actions. Then he can take pride in himself without comparing himself to someone else. For each one should carry his own load. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. The one who sows to please his sinful nature, from that nature will reap destruction. The one who sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. I chose this scripture to reflect boundaries because we really need to be looking at ourselves. And oftentimes, if you lack boundaries, it's because you don't really consider yourself. You don't think about, who you are, what your values are, what you need, and how you want to pursue the things in your life. You're always thinking about others, how to please them, how to make them happy. But God makes it very clear that each person should carry their own load. You're not meant to carry the loads of others. You're not meant to be the one who always picks up the slack. You're not meant to be the one who steps in every time there's a need. And so this is just a way for you to check yourself and to really evaluate, am I really considering myself? Am I really carrying my load, or am I choosing to carry the load of others? So the first step for setting up personal boundaries is recognize what areas you need to establish boundaries. Evaluate what areas in your life that you need more boundaries. If there's areas you need, write them down and reflect on what you need for each of those situations. In every area of my life that I've had growth and healing, the first step is to always acknowledge or recognize. Because if you don't realize that you're struggling with boundaries in an area, then you can't really address it. And so this is the first step, is to really go back to the beginning and evaluate all those different areas of your life, you know, whether it's work, relationships, time, relationships with others, maybe boundaries on, you know, material possessions that you own. In what areas do you lack boundaries? In what areas do people tend to take advantage of you and tend to more easily control or manipulate you? So this is the areas where you're going to need to really think about this, and this might take you some time. It might take you even to, as you're aware of it, going through the day-to-day life when you're experiencing things, and then you're like, oh my goodness, this is an area where I'm really struggling. This is an area where I really lack some boundaries. And so as you go through your weeks and your days, it'll almost, now that you're aware of it, it will pop up and you'll be like, oh, this is an area that I need to work on. And that is what I encourage you to write them down, right? Every time you feel, you know, even when something happens and you didn't have the ability to say no in that moment, and then you did it, and then you felt angry and you felt resentful and all those things, those are all signs to you that you compromised one of your personal values or one of your personal needs to meet the needs of someone else. And that was a boundary that you were not able to uphold. 2 Thessalonians 3:10-13. For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule: if a man will not work, he shall not eat. We hear that some among you are idle. They're not busy, they're busybodies. Such people we command and urge you in the Lord Jesus Christ to settle down and earn the bread that they eat. There's many people in my life growing up and even recently that, you know, they don't do the hard work of really providing for themselves, or, you know, being diligent and do all of these things for themselves. And they really expect others to do it for them. It's almost like that mindset of entitlement. And this isn't just to a specific age group or generation. I've seen it all across the board. And oftentimes it's because this is what we've been taught. We've just had, you know, people do things for us. It's just been handed to us. And for the longest time, these are actually the things I was teaching my kids when they were young, was that, oh, you need something, well, I'll do it for you. And so as I've learned boundaries, I've realized the fact that the greatest thing that I can offer those in my life, especially those close to me, is the ability for them to learn how to do these things themselves. And it will create for them the ability to not only take responsibility for themselves, but it's also a commandment from the Lord that if a man doesn't work, if a man doesn't be diligent in his ways, like, he shouldn't even eat. That's how strongly the Lord feels about this. And I believe that that's also why we need to consider this as a very strong message for us to apply to our lives. This is another scripture which I've read it 100 times, but the last week when I read it, it just popped off the page. A hot-tempered man must pay the penalty, if you rescue him, you'll have to do it again. And so when I think about what a hot-tempered man is, that could be someone with a quick temper. That could be someone who, you know, always fights to get their own way, but basically they don't want to do anything about it. Or someone who continually makes the same mistake over and over again. They don't really think things through. But the Bible's clear that you shouldn't rescue these people. You shouldn't be the one to always step in and you know, either take the penalty for it or somehow make it right for them. It says that that man must pay the penalty. Well, what does the penalty mean? That means that they need to face the consequences of their actions. And so sometimes the most loving thing you can do for the people in your life is let them face the consequences of their actions. If you're always rescuing people and if you're always trying to bring the solutions, then they're never going to learn from their mistakes. They're never going to learn from what they've done and then be able to make better choices. And so when we do that for people, when we don't have boundaries, when we don't allow people to live the consequences of their actions, that's essentially what we're doing. We're rescuing them. We're saving them from the consequence of their actions, but we're not allowing them to actually learn. Step 2 for setting out personal boundaries. Define what your boundaries will be. Once you've established which areas you need boundaries, you need to decide what boundaries you're going to set up. And I would recommend that when you do this, that you only choose one area to focus on at a time. And in all my life, in the growth that I've done, if I do too much at once, then I don't do anything well, and then I just kind of quit. And so I just want you to maybe choose one area, and maybe it's the area where you struggle the most, or for you, maybe it's going to be the area where you can make the most change quickest because it's something that's not too deeply ingrained. Whatever your choice is, just choose one area. And when you do that, I want you to think about, what would you want to change? How do you want others to respond to you? How do you want your responses to be when specific situations come up? And I want you to write those things down, because when those situations arise, it will be important for you to know, like to have ahead of time, know how you're going to respond to those situations. So I'll use it for example in my life. When I married my husband, he was $750,000 in debt. And that was because of a really bad business relationship gone bad, and it just left him in a lot of debt. And so when I married him, I personally took on the responsibility of paying off his debt. And in doing so, I had this mindset that in order to do that, I had to work full time. And so because I needed to create as much value, I needed to bring in as much income so that we could pay off this debt as quickly as possible. And I continued that mindset as we started having children, as our family grew, as our life changed, even as my children were a little bit older and I started a homeschool, I still worked in the business, and I worked taking care of the children, plus I homeschooled. And like, I literally burnt myself at every end, and I had no boundaries. So every time, like, I would be in the middle of homeschooling my kids, and then my husband would call and he'd be like, oh, I need you to send this email, or I need you to make this phone call. Like, I would just drop everything and go do that. And so I wasn't able to effectively, teach my children at the same time of trying to work in the business. It was awful. And so after many years of going through my burnout and going through a lot of work with my counselor and learning how to set up boundaries, I decided that for me, at that time, I could only work one day in the business. And so I said to my husband, Doug, I can only work one day in the business. Right now I'm caring for our children. At that point, I was still homeschooling, but that was to end quite shortly after that. But I was also caring for his parents who were ailing at the time. And so I said, I can't do this all anymore. And so I told him that I could only work 1 day a week. And I told him which day that was. And it was extremely hard for him. He would always want to call me and ask me for help for this, or I need you to do this design, or I need you to do this. But I kept my ground, and I kept saying, no, I can do whatever you need, but only on this 1 day a week. And it was hard at first because he really pushed and he really pushed. And yes, did these other things need to be done that day? Yes, and I had always done it for him. So he really didn't have to develop the skills or the time management of his own. He just relied on me. And so it created some conflict in our marriage. It created some stress. But in the long run, once we were able to establish these boundaries, it created freedom. It created freedom for me. It developed, he was challenged to develop skills of time management and also delegating to other people, or really organizing himself better so that he can manage his business when I wasn't available. And so you're going to have to decide, number one, what areas you want to see change, how you want others to respond to you, and how you're going to set up those new boundaries. This is another major key to me healing in this area. This is called the circle of responsibility. The outer circle says is not my responsibility. And so when I was struggling with boundaries, I thought everything on this chart was my responsibility. So what other people thought, what other people's actions were, the consequences of their actions, their thoughts, the words that they said, even their mistakes. I took all that responsibility on myself, as well as my own behaviors, actions, and thoughts. But going through this process, I realized that the only thing I'm responsible for are my words, my behavior, my actions, my efforts, my mistakes, my ideas, and the consequences of my actions. And so sometimes when you're going through situations, you need to slow yourself down and to be able to look at the situation objectively and to examine whether that's actually your responsibility or not. And so, for example, in regards to our business, like if Doug in his head, wanted to schedule an appointment with a client for Friday, but my only work day was a Monday and he scheduled this on a Tuesday, then if he disappointed his client, it was not my responsibility because I had already told him that the only day I work is on Monday. And so I had to separate the fact that I was not responsible for him not keeping his word to his client. That was his responsibility. And so, even putting this chart up somewhere to have it remind you is helpful. I have one up on my wall in my home. And it just helps you recognize that when a situation's happening, how to recognize what you are responsible for and what you're not. And when you can determine where you end and someone else begins, that's the first step in you really truly being able to start creating the life that you want, really pursuing your dreams, your desires, and to set up the boundaries that you need. In Psalm 104, 6-9, you covered it with the deep as the garment. The waters stood above the mountains, but at your rebuke, the waters fled. At the sound of thunder, they took to flight. They flowed over the mountains. They went down in the valleys to the place that you assigned for them. You set a boundary they could not pass. Never again would they cover the earth. So this scripture is talking about when the earth was flooded by waters. And it's describing how God rebuked the waters and they had to go to the appointed place that God had assigned for them. Now God has promised he would never flood the earth again. But he's actually set boundaries where the oceans can't cross again. And so when you think about this in our life, think of the floodwaters as, when you are so overwhelmed, when you've maybe haven't had appropriate boundaries and you've basically taken the responsibilities of your life, of everyone's life on your own. When you choose to no longer do that and you choose to set up boundaries, it'll be like this scripture where Jesus rebuked the waters and they fled, and then they stayed within the boundaries that he set for them. And that's really what you need to do. You need to recognize where people have crossed the line. And in most cases, it's going to be because you allowed them to. But when you set up those boundaries, they're not to cross those boundaries. And when they do, you'll recognize it. And you can then reinforce the reason why you won't tolerate that in your life. And so I just found this scripture so cool, so encouraging, that even in regards to, natural things in the world, like God places boundaries in place and he encourages us to do the same. None of us were meant to be walked over. None of us were meant to be slaves to another. And so recognizing this as something that is needed in your life will be invaluable. Step number 3, clearly communicate. Now this, I think, may be the one step where most of us fail. And for many years I did. And, because you can recognize the fact that you need boundaries in your life. You can recognize what area you really struggle in. You can think about how you're going to do that. But if you don't communicate it with the people in your life, it's going to have no impact. In fact, it might have a negative reaction because they will have no idea what's going on. So when you come to these revelations about how you want to be treated as a person, how you want your relationships to be, how you want boundaries even on your time or different areas of your life, you need to communicate it to people. And so this is a good way that you can communicate it. So when you're talking to someone, you can say, when you do this, I feel this way, and I would like you to do this. If you don't, then you give them the consequences. I will have to do this. And then even if they don't listen at that point, you say, if you continue to do this, I'm going to have to do this. And so basically you're outlining very clearly what you don't like, what you don't want to tolerate in your life anymore, what you want to see happen as a result of change, and then what will the consequence be if they don't honor those boundaries that you've placed in your life. James 5:12, above all, my brothers, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. Let your yes be yes and your no be no, or you will be condemned. In this scripture, God's really addressing the fact that we need to be very clear in our communication with others. And he says all the time, like even in regards to faith, like you can't sit on the fence. You either believe in God or you don't. You can't sit on the fence. And so when it comes to decisions, even in your life, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Because how many times and I've done this, and I'm sure you can relate, how many times have, someone come to you with a need or a desire or something they wanted you to do, and originally you said no. But then they came back with well, I really need you to do this, or if you don't help me out with this, this is what's going to happen. And then you felt guilty. And then over time, you gave in, and you changed your no to a yes. And I really feel that God's challenging us that if our no is a no, then just let your no be a no. Like, don't change it, right? But if your yes is a yes, then let it be a yes. And so just to be really clear when you communicate with others, and don't be swayed. And this is the one thing that I really had to grow in, is when I say no, my answer is no. And even with my children now, for many years, like I would say no to something and then they would come with their puppy dog eyes or, oh, mom, please, or all of these things. And then I'd be like, okay, whatever. And I just give in, right? And it's like, I'm learning that I can't do that. And I'm recognizing the times when I do that. And I'm like, no, I said no. My answer is no. So a way that you show me honor is by respecting the fact that I said no, right? No means no. And so every time that I say that, but then I go back on it, I'm actually teaching them that my no doesn't matter. And so this is very important that we establish boundaries. The fourth step is to follow through. Consistency is the key to success. If you don't follow through, if you don't stay consistent, then you're just going to fall back into old patterns. And I've referred to this before, but I'm going to say it again. When you do something repeatedly over time, it actually creates neural pathways in your brain. And so when you're trying to start something new, a new habit, set up new boundaries, you're going to need to be consistent. And it's in that consistency where you're going to get strength, you're going to get momentum, you're going to see the positive results, and you're going to want to do it more. And so being consistent, having the same answer when you face that same situation over and over again, that is going to be the key to you succeeding. Another point I want to bring up is don't let the fear of how others will react keep you stuck in your destructive cycles. When I first challenged my husband on a few things that God was revealing to me, there was a lot of backlash, and not because he's a bad person, not because I was being stubborn. It was a pattern of behavior that had gone on for so long that it was hard to change. And for someone to all of a sudden set up boundaries and the other person have to navigate that, it's difficult. And so when you have people in your life that you're setting boundaries up around, they're going to react. And so the temptation will be that when that reaction comes, to just kind of quit or be afraid of it. But I want to encourage you not to. Because first of all, I want to encourage you not to be afraid of it. Just first of all, expect it. It's going to happen because they have to adjust too. They have to figure out how to be in relationship with you in your new normal. And trust me, if you are consistent over time, it will get better. They will grow, they will learn, they will honor your new boundaries. They will change as you change. Another point is to have enough courage to stand up for yourself and what you need, because you are worth it. And if that's maybe all you get out of this, or maybe that's what you need to hear, is that you're worth it, maybe that's the key for you. Maybe you need to know that you have value and that what you need is important and that it's okay for you to stand up for yourself. And so I want you to really embark on a journey of being more courageous, speaking up for yourself, being authentic and true, and not letting others manipulate you. Like I said, things will often get worse before they get better. And that's simply just because whoever you're setting up boundaries with, whatever situation it is, they're going to need to change too. And there will be reaction, there will be they will resist it before it gets better. This saying I've loved from the moment I read it. The only people who get upset about you setting boundaries are the ones benefiting from you having none. Now, there's two different kinds of people who will be in your life. There will be the people who authentically need to be in your life. There are people who love you and care about you. And when you set up new boundaries, They will perhaps potentially be frustrated. They will potentially have negative reactions, but over time they will honor you and they will change. But there's also those relationships that when you have boundaries, they're not going to honor you and they're not going to respect you. And in fact, it's going to have the opposite reaction. And it's those relationships in your life where when you set up new boundaries, they're unable to adjust to them. They're unable to honor you and see the value in them. Then those are the relationships I would encourage you to not pursue, to just let them go, because those are not the relationships you want to continue having, because those are the people that will want to continually take advantage of you, who will continually want to push you beyond what you desire, what your values are, what you believe in, and what you need for yourself. So take evaluation of your relationships. If someone's reaction to you setting up boundaries is consistently disrespect and they want nothing to do with it and they fight it all the way, maybe those relationships you need to think of no longer having. Good boundaries can positively impact everything from your energy levels, sense of self-esteem, and quality of relationships. I'm currently working with a lady in our mentoring program, and we're working specifically on boundaries. And at first, when we started talking about this, she said to me, I absolutely cannot do this. There is no way I can set up boundaries with this person in her life who was really negatively impacting her. And I really challenged her and I just said, you know, you can't really afford not to put up these boundaries. And I encouraged her to try with something even really small, something, you know, that might even seem insignificant, to take tiny little baby steps. And it took some time. A situation came up and she recognized it for what it was. She didn't like the way she's being treated or spoken to, and she stood up for herself. And so on our next mentoring call, she told me all about it. And not only was she so surprised at herself, but she was proud of herself. And then the results of what happened as a result of that was incredible. And it was exactly what I told her would happen. The more boundaries you put in place and you stay consistent at, and you honor yourself, the more changes you'll see. And it actually creates this cycle of excitement. Like for me, when I did it, it was so challenging and it was difficult to have people in my life, you know, be in opposition to what I was doing. But the more I did it, the more I was consistent, the more I saw the results of them finally honoring me, them respecting me, them seeing the value in who I was, them then reciprocating that. It like literally brought me so much joy. And this is what happened for this lady that I'm working with. She just had so much joy as a result of it. She basically felt free for the first time in longer than she could remember. And so I want to encourage you that as you set up these boundaries, as you remain consistent, as you do the work of implementing these and sticking to it, to see the value in yourself and standing up for yourself, it's going to create a snowball effect in your life. And you're going to then get excited to do it again. You're going to get excited to do it more. You're going to find more areas and areas where you need to do the same, and it's going to give you the courage to do it. And so I encourage you to go on this journey, not with fear, not with trepidation, not with, you know, not thinking that you can do this, because you can do this and it's worth it. And the more you do it, the more it will get easier to do and it'll be exciting. Some of the results of setting up good boundaries is you're going to start to prioritize yourself. And this is important because most of the time when you don't have boundaries, when you lack boundaries, it's because you don't prioritize yourself. You put everyone's needs above your own. So when you start setting up good boundaries, you're going to start valuing you. You're going to start making yourself a priority. Number 2, relationships become safe and healthy. Those relationships in your life that are closest to you, that need to be kept, those are the ones that are actually going to become healthy. And then you're going to be able to identify the unhealthy relationships that no longer should continue. Number 4, you'll be able to keep balance in your life. You'll be able to have more opportunity to say no to things that don't matter to you, and have opportunities to say yes to things that you really want to do that maybe you didn't have the time to do before. And number 5, it's going to impact your self-esteem. You're going to start seeing yourself with greater value. You're going to see yourself worthy, that you are worth the time. You're worth being spoken up about. You're worth really placing value on who you are, your dreams, what you want, and what you hope for in the future. This quote from Anna Taylor: love yourself enough to set boundaries. Your time and energy are precious, and you get to decide how you use them. You teach people how to treat you by deciding what you will and what you won't accept. So we're going to do a quick activation. So if you can grab a piece of paper, and I'm going to read off a list of questions, and all you need to do is answer yes or no to the following questions. And then afterwards, we'll discuss the results of the answers to these questions. So this is called the guilt quiz. And the reason we're doing this is because a lot of times when we lack boundaries with others, it's because we experience a lot of guilt surrounding the reasons why we feel inadequate to say no. And so what we're going to do, Ethel, I see you've just joined us again. We're just doing a little activation quiz here. So if you have a piece of paper and a pen, we're just going to either answer yes or no to the following questions that I read out. So, number 1, I get defensive when someone criticizes me. Yes or no? So you don't have to write out the question, just write yes or no. Number 2, I'm critical of myself on a daily basis about something. Yes or no? Number 3, I don't feel like I get enough in my day, enough done in my day. Yes or no? Number 4, I sometimes fall short of my own expectations. Yes or no? Number 5, I don't work hard enough. Yes or no? Number 6, I have a hard time letting go of my past mistakes. Yes or no? 7, I don't spend enough time with my children or family. Yes or no? Number 8, I don't give my spouse or significant others enough attention. Yes or no? 9, I worry about what other people think of me or my family. Yes or no? Number 10, I get my feelings hurt easily. Yes or no? Number 11, I need to take better care of myself or lose weight. Yes or no? Number 12, I have bad habits that I can't seem to break. Yes or no? Number 13, I often feel as if I'm disappointing someone in my life. Yes or no? Number 14, number 14, I don't like to hurt other people's feelings. Yes or no? And number 15, I feel guilty easily, yes or no. So what you do now is you just count up all of the ones that you answered yes to and get your total. You don't have to disclose what you scored because this is really a personal journey, but I'll tell you, this quiz was actually is part of the Midwest Center for Overcoming Anxiety and Depression program. And Connie and I, we actually got this program 20 something years ago, and we've just been going through it again just to brush up on some of our things. And we just felt like this was applicable to today's webinar. And so if you said yes to between 0 and 3 of those questions, then this is what they say you are. You don't have a lot of guilt, but you also don't have a lot of sensitivity either. You're probably a little self-centered, and you don't feel bothered if you've hurt someone else's feelings. It's not the healthiest score, and you need to work on being more sensitive. They say if you've scored between 4 to 7, you have more of a healthy perspective. You have a healthy concern for others, but not at your own expense. You have a healthy self-esteem. If you've scored between 7 to 10, you're a little too sensitive. You're the kind of person that others will take advantage of. They will push your buttons and they will make you feel guilty. And if you've scored between 11 and 15, you are so sensitive, you will feel guilty. People will push your buttons and they will get the response and reaction they're looking for. And you've trained them that they can make you feel bad. So I'm not sure where you fall in that spectrum, but I just felt like this was a great way of kind of seeing where you are at. And when I'll just be candid, when I did this, I scored an 8. And so for me, that says I'm a little bit too sensitive, and I'm the kind of person that I get taken advantage of, that people push my buttons and I tend to feel guilty. And you know what? I'm still working on establishing some boundaries in my life. And you know what? In some ways, I still struggle with this a bit. And there's still areas in my life and people in my life where I'm like, okay, I don't like that way that went. I don't like the way that you're treating me, the way that you perceive our relationship. And so there's still areas in my life where I'm like, I recognize the fact that I still have some work to do. And so this isn't like, oh no, I can't believe I scored a 9 or a 15 or whatever. Really, it's just a way of you recognizing maybe where you are at, maybe where you're struggling, maybe an area where you can work on more. And so I just felt like it was a great tool to really do a little bit of more self-examination and just see, you know, where you're at and maybe where you struggle. And maybe for you, it's that you care too much about what other people think about you. And so you're always trying to please others. Or maybe it's you don't want to tell the truth because you don't want to hurt other people's feelings. So in relationships, we always need to look at, you don't want to be rude to others, but you also want to be truthful. You want to be authentic, and you want to be able to address issues as they're coming up and to be authentic. And so I hope that gave you some insight into maybe some of your own struggles, where you're at in the area of guilt, because often guilt, like I said, is associated with failing and not being able to set up boundaries in your relationships. So what are the 4 keys to remember? Number 1, recognize what areas you need to set up boundaries. Number 2, define what those boundaries will be. Number 3, communicate them clearly. And number 4, follow through and be consistent. I love this quote from Anne Lamott too. No is a complete sentence. And that was the one thing my counselor taught me. It's like, it's okay just to say no. You don't need to explain. So our next webinar is coming up in August on August 4th. We'll be talking about living in the margins, about really creating space in your life. Number one, for rest, but also so you can breathe, so that you have space in your life for the things that truly matter. And how do we do that? What does that look like? How do you practically create margin in your life, especially when, you know, for many of us, we're like, for many years, I was burning my candles at every end. So I'd love for you guys to join us then. If you're not able to make it, it will be recorded and posted later, but we would love for you to join us. If you know people that would benefit from talking more about this, we would love for them to join us. So please share the link with them. And if you need any further supports, if you want to meet one-on-one with one of our mentors, please reach out to us, and stay tuned for more stuff coming up later this summer and early fall, and just continue to reach out to us if you need any supports. Thanks for joining us.